Hello and welcome to how to use this steel powder. Now while I show you the end product of the 30 different experiments, I'd like to say there's no way I could edit this to make it look interesting. This piece will be the starting point for all the experiments. Before I go into how to apply the product, I have broken down the steps I took into photos at the end of this video. And as I'm not a graphic designer, I hope you can still understand them. To apply the powder, you can use your wife's kitchen sponge, packing foam, and whatever these two foams are called, or the silicone brushes that polish as you put the product on. You could use your finger, but don't. For polishing the product, you can use part of a sock, ribbon from a present, the cloth that comes with your glasses, actual polishing cloths which I don't own, or the bottom of your t-shirt if you don't want to leave your chair. For safety you should wear gloves and a mask. I'll be putting this part of this t-shirt over my nose. When using a sponge, cut it longer than you need, or you'll struggle to get it back out, and then rub the powder onto the pre-primed part. I find circular motions come out better. I'm not quite sure what the green side of this sponge is for, but I've found the yellow side doesn't leave little scratch marks behind. Also, using larger pieces would make this a bit easier. Using denser foam also seems to work better. Waste not, want not, but I've always found the large flat piece of a silicone brush always gives a better result. At this point I realised there was going to be a clear winner, and not priming your model would be the worst outcome. But forging on with every type of cloth that I mentioned, I started to realise whilst polishing, a textured, painted or gloss surface seemed to work the best with little effort, and that bare plastic isn't even worth trying. As you can see, the shiniest areas on this little piece were the areas that had more prep work into them. And before I applied paints and varnish on top of the steel powder, to answer a lot of questions I received and clear up some misconceptions I had, I decided to clean the non-primed area and use the method that involved. I'm not paying that much for that little tub. So all I did was scrape graphite from a very cheap stick to create my own powder. And I chose a brush with a sharp edge, as I was using Vallejo glossy black primer. To demonstrate if you're over eager when applying the powder, you will lift the primer up off the surface. You don't get this with Citadel Chaos Black, but the Vallejo primers make the powder look more shiny. So after rubbing the corner for a little while, you can see it starts to lift up. And when polished aggressively, I just make it look worse. I would also like to say that I applied all the paints with a brush, as well as the varnishes, and I wasn't looking for a smooth finish, so I know it looks like I haven't painted before. But my Stormcast Mini was airbrushed, so I know it works anyway. Also, I thought I'd try a very old method of flattening out some tinfoil, and don't judge me, I couldn't be bothered to go downstairs to get the smooth stuff, and then apply a thin layer of very watered down PVA glue, then gently placing the piece of tin foil on top, followed by smoothing the surface from the centre to the edges to squeeze out the excess PVA glue. The pictures at the end of this video do show exactly where I put the varnishes here, but the main goal is to separate the difference between do you need to varnish if you want to paint on top of it or not. Now I know every Warhammer painter is lost without this next product, so I applied some of the Agrax Earthshave over the powder. And I prefer using a dark brown ink wash, but found applying it over the graphite without a varnish gave it a hydrophobic effect. After applying 4 different manufacturers of paint to the varnished and unvarnished side, I was going to use my decal solution but decided against it to see if the decals would stick without it. I found that the decals, enamels and oil paints, as well as the white spirits, didn't react with the varnished or unvarnished side. Whilst that was drying, I decided to give a second coat of powder to the 2 middle columns to see what would happen once reapplied over the different surfaces, and found that reapplying over any varnish, including matte, enhanced the steel look even more. But when looking at the other side, the area that had the Chaos Black primer followed by gloss varnish was almost mirror-like. Now the painted area at the top did break one of my misconceptions. Not that you should apply the powder before you paint the rest of the model as it gets everywhere, but that applying the paint on top of the powder would make it come off easily, without varnishing the powder first. I was amazed that the paint stuck fast to it, including the cheap one. However, I would still varnish the powder first. As you can see, it still lifts off and starts to dull the colours next to it. So I was right, but for the wrong reasons. Now to demonstrate that even if you varnish on top of cheap paint, it still scrapes off easily. And after pecking at the paints like a bird with my nails, I was even more surprised how the unvarnished side held up. It's almost like the miniature paint manufacturers actually know what they're doing. So maybe that's what you're paying for. And for comparison, I love my expensive inks, but they came off so easily I was majorly surprised. So very expensive paint can almost be like cheap paint. Now applying a second coat of powder on top of varnish gives the best results. However, if I run my finger down the middle of this part, it would get covered in powder. So my recommendation would be to apply the powder on top of a gloss finish and apply gloss varnish on top of that. Now if you've made it this far, you can see the photos of the finished product with the steps I took to get to them. And I couldn't figure out an easier way of displaying this. So good luck in deciphering my hieroglyphics. And just to take away from this, apply the powder to a painted surface and put a gloss varnish on top of it. Thanks for watching and have fun.